Across the United States, an unseen network pulses beneath our feet. Spanning more than 2.8 million miles, pipelines silently and efficiently transport the lifeblood of our economy. Energy. From rural landscapes to urban centers, this vast web of infrastructure is a critical part of daily life, delivering the fuel, gas, and chemicals that power homes, businesses, and industries.
These pipelines are categorized by what they carry and how they function. There are three primary types of pipelines in the U.S. Natural gas pipelines, over 2.2 million miles, including gathering, transmission, and distribution lines. Hazardous liquid pipelines, more than 230,000 miles, transporting crude oil, refined petroleum products, and other liquids like anhydrous ammonia or carbon dioxide. Other hazardous material pipelines, often used for chemicals, industrial gases, or specialty fuels. Collectively, these pipelines move millions of barrels and billions of cubic feet of material each day.
Natural gas pipelines gather fuel from production sites, transport it across long distances via transmission lines, and deliver it to homes and businesses through distribution networks. Crude oil pipelines move unrefined oil from wellheads to refineries. Product pipelines carry refined products like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel to distribution centers. Hazardous liquid pipelines transport not only petroleum products, but also chemicals such as ethylene, propane, and carbon dioxide, many of which are flammable, explosive, or toxic.
Who controls and regulates pipelines? The answer is a partnership of private companies and government agencies. Most pipelines in the U.S. are owned and operated by private industry. Companies like ExxonMobil, Kinder Morgan, Colonial Pipeline, and TC Energy manage some of the largest networks. But safety and environmental integrity are overseen by federal and state agencies. At the federal level, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, a division of the U.S. Department of Transportation, is the primary regulator. PHMSA sets the rules for pipeline construction, operation, and emergency response. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, also investigates major accidents. In Mississippi, Public Utility Commissions, or the Oil and Gas Board, work alongside PHMSA to enforce standards.
Pipeline operators use a range of technologies to monitor conditions. Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition Systems, or SCADA, allow for real-time data collection, tracking pressure, flow rates, and valve positions 24/7. Many operators also use inline inspection tools, known as smart pigs, which scan the interior walls of pipelines for corrosion, cracks, or other weaknesses. Despite all of this, accidents can and do happen.
When a pipeline fails, the results can be catastrophic. Leaks, ruptures, fires, and explosions have caused loss of life, environmental damage, and community disruption. Some materials transported through pipelines pose unique risks. Natural gas is highly flammable and can form explosive clouds when released. Crude oil and refined products are combustible and can ignite with a spark. Anhydrous ammonia and carbon dioxide can displace oxygen, causing asphyxiation. Other chemicals can be toxic, corrosive, or reactive.
That's why first responders play a critical role. From volunteer firefighters in small towns to full-time hazmat teams in metropolitan areas, emergency personnel are often the first on the scene when something goes wrong. Early coordination with pipeline operators can save lives. First responders must know where pipelines are located in their jurisdiction. Understand the types of materials transported nearby. Identify pipeline markers, which show the product type, operator name, and emergency number. Coordinate pre-incident planning with operators. Access emergency response guides and contact sheets ahead of time. Train for worst-case scenarios, like high-pressure gas leaks or large-scale product spills.
Many pipeline companies provide community awareness and training sessions. These include tabletop exercises, facility tours, joint response drills, web-based training, safety literature, and outreach programs. Operators are required under federal law to maintain public awareness programs, and first responders are a key audience. This collaboration strengthens community resilience and ensures that responders are not walking into danger blind. That is the goal of the Msperi program, to unite responders and operators before an incident occurs. Knowing the roles and expectations of each other can provide a better response to our community, safer emergency scene for responders, and a quicker recovery for the operators.
Pipeline rights-of-way are another essential concept for emergency response. These are cleared, controlled corridors where pipelines are installed. While not always visible, markers help identify their locations. They often cross roads, rivers, and rail lines, even running beneath populated neighborhoods or industrial parks. In emergencies, accessing the right-of-way quickly is vital. Responders need to know who to call, how to safely isolate and secure the area, what hazards are present. While responders should know where the nearest valves are located, it is critical that first responders do not operate any pipeline valves. This is the responsibility of the pipeline operator. Operating valves by anyone other than the operator can result in increased damage, other emergencies in other parts of the pipeline, and a delay in mitigating the situation.
The National Pipeline Mapping System, or NPMS, is a resource offered by PHMSA that shows pipeline locations by county or zip code. This tool is designed for government and emergency officials. It can help fire departments, law enforcement, and EMS agencies build better emergency plans. The Mississippi Oil and Gas Board maintains a pipeline database, and operators often share GIS maps upon request. Knowledge is power when seconds count.
Responding to a pipeline incident is different than responding to a structure fire or highway crash. The materials involved behave differently. The ignition sources may be hidden. The exclusion zones must be larger. And the need for unified command between agencies and the pipeline operator is immediate. Effective response involves incident command structure, hazard identification, evacuation planning, communication with the operator's control center, use of air monitoring equipment, coordination with environmental protection agencies.
We've trained with the local pipeline operator 3 times this year. They've helped us understand what's underground, how to isolate a leak, and who to call. That pre-planning makes a big difference when the call comes in.
Pipelines are vital. They move the materials that keep America running. But like all infrastructure, they come with risks. The key to safety lies in collaboration between pipeline operators, regulators, and the first responders who protect our communities. Through awareness, training, and proactive communication, we can reduce hazards and respond more effectively when seconds matter most. Whether you're a firefighter, paramedic, police officer, or emergency manager, understanding pipelines is not just useful, it's essential. Know what's under your feet. Be ready when it counts. And always stay connected to your local pipeline operators.
When a pipeline incident occurs, it can escalate quickly, posing immediate threats to life, property, and the environment. Whether it's a gas leak, a petroleum release, or a toxic chemical spill, one thing is certain. A structured, coordinated response is critical. That's where the Incident Command System, or ICS, comes in.
The Incident Command System is a standardized, scalable framework used by emergency responders nationwide. It provides clear roles, structured communication, and efficient coordination across agencies, especially in complex hazardous materials responses. Pipeline incidents demand rapid decision-making, integration of specialized knowledge, and seamless communication between first responders on scene, pipeline company representatives, local emergency planning committees, state and federal partners.
From the start, unified command is essential. Pipeline operators bring technical expertise, real-time data, and control over the product flow. First responders bring boots on the ground, fire suppression, hazmat mitigation, EMS, and evacuation coordination. When these efforts are aligned through unified command, everyone works toward the same objectives, with the same situational awareness.
Pipeline company representatives should be embedded in the command structure as soon as possible. They can identify the substance involved, provide pipeline maps and valve locations, access remote shutoff systems, supply material safety data sheets, MSDS, advise on product behavior, health effects, and mitigation tactics. In short, they are critical technical specialists in the ICS framework.
Coordination begins long before an incident happens, through local emergency planning committees, or LEPCs. LEPCs are made up of public safety officials, industry partners, and community stakeholders. They help identify local hazards, maintain response plans, and organize joint training. In a pipeline emergency, the LEPC can activate pre-incident plans, facilitate resource sharing, assist with public notifications, provide contact lists and jurisdictional coordination, support incident documentation and recovery planning. Strong LEPC engagement turns chaos into coordination.
When the scope of the incident expands, federal resources are brought in. PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, oversees pipeline safety and can dispatch investigators and technical advisors. EPA and FEMA may activate under the National Response Framework to support environmental assessment, air and water monitoring, and long-term recovery. If criminal activity or terrorism is suspected, the FBI and DHS will engage through the Joint Terrorism Task Force. All of this is done through the ICS framework.
An effective pipeline hazmat response within ICS will typically include an incident commander or unified command group, operations section managing suppression, evacuation, hazmat entry, and product containment, planning section developing incident action plans, situational status boards, and resource forecasts, logistics section coordinating equipment, personnel rehab, communication systems, and specialized tools, finance and admin section tracking costs, documentation, and contractor resources. Pipeline-specific tasks, like leak control, pressure monitoring, and product diversion, are managed jointly with the operator under operations.
In many pipeline incidents, evacuation and shelter-in-place decisions must be made quickly. ICS allows for these decisions to be coordinated with emergency management, public health, the pipeline operator, and local government under a joint information system. Public messaging must be timely, accurate, consistent, coordinated across all levels of government. The pipeline company may also provide resources for public outreach and recovery assistance.
Pre-incident training is the foundation for ICS success. Drills and tabletop exercises involving local responders and pipeline operators build familiarity and trust. These exercises should test unified command structure, hazard communication and product ID, response zone entry procedures, decontamination and PPE protocols, communications interoperability, integration of federal support. Remember, you don't want to exchange business cards for the first time on the day of the disaster. In the high-stakes world of hazardous materials response, ICS is more than a model, it's a lifeline. It brings structure to uncertainty. It turns individual agencies into a cohesive team. And it ensures that the pipeline operator, the responders, and the public are all part of the same mission. Whether you're fire, EMS, law enforcement, or emergency management, know your role. Trust the system. Train together. Because when pressure builds, ICS holds the line. Pipeline emergencies are low-frequency, but high-impact events. When a leak, rupture, or explosion occurs, the effects can be sudden and devastating. That's why effective planning at every level, local, state, and federal is essential. Let's take a closer look at how planning for a pipeline emergency is structured, and who's involved at each level.
At the local level, first responders, fire, EMS, law enforcement are usually the first on scene. Their planning focuses on immediate life safety, hazard identification, and control. Initial evacuation or shelter in place. Establishing incident command. To prepare, local agencies should maintain up-to-date pre-incident plans for pipeline corridors. Participate in pipeline awareness training. Coordinate with pipeline operators on response zones, valve shutoffs, and product hazards. Identify local resources like foam trailers, air monitoring tools, or mutual aid teams. These plans should be reviewed annually and exercised regularly.
Local Emergency Planning Committees, or LEPCs, serve as the next layer of coordination. Established under the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, LEPCs develop and maintain the community's emergency response plan. Collect and manage information on hazardous materials in the area. Facilitate training, drills, and communication between public safety and industry. Coordinate public education and outreach. In a pipeline emergency, the LEPC helps connect agencies and ensures the community is aware, prepared, and informed. They also serve as a bridge between local responders and state resources.
At the state level, emergency management agencies provide a broader framework for pipeline emergency planning and support. State roles include coordinating mutual aid across jurisdictions, activating the State Emergency Operations Center, EOC, providing technical guidance and funding for training and equipment, managing public health and environmental concerns, requesting federal support if the incident exceeds state capabilities. States also regulate intrastate pipelines and often maintain GIS pipeline maps and response databases. During an incident, state officials support the local incident command and help ensure a unified, statewide response effort.
At the federal level, multiple agencies may become involved depending on the size, impact, and material released. The Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, is the lead federal agency for pipeline safety. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, may be activated to manage environmental protection and contamination issues. If disaster-level resources are needed, FEMA can be engaged under the Stafford Act. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, investigates major pipeline incidents involving fatalities or significant environmental harm. Federal response planning includes access to the National Response Framework, use of regional hazmat response teams, integration with the National Incident Management System, support from the National Response Center, NRC, for reporting and coordination. Federal support enhances, not replaces, local command. The ICS structure remains intact, with federal partners plugging into unified command.
Media coordination and public information are a critical part of pipeline emergency planning at all levels. An effective response must also include timely and coordinated public messaging, joint information centers when multiple agencies are involved, use of public information officers, PIOs trained in Joint Information System protocols, activation of emergency alert systems, social media, and local media outlets, coordination with the pipeline company's communication team. Misinformation spreads fast. Public confidence relies on clear, credible, and unified messages from trusted sources. Planning should include media roles in drills and pre-scripted public safety announcements for various pipeline scenarios.
All of these levels, local, LEPCs, state, and federal, should be connected through joint training, planning, and information sharing. Regular exercises should test unified command, resource requests across jurisdictions, evacuation planning, air and water monitoring, long-term recovery coordination, and media briefings and rumor control. Pipeline operators are required by federal law to engage in public awareness and emergency coordination. Use these opportunities to strengthen your plans.
Pipeline emergency planning is layered, built from the ground up. It starts with first responders, supported by LEPCs, reinforced by state agencies, and backed by federal partners. Every level matters, and every plan should be current, collaborative, practiced, and shared across agencies. When all levels align, Communities are safer and responders are better prepared to act.
To strengthen your pipeline emergency planning, connect with your local LEPC. Coordinate with pipeline operators in your jurisdiction. Review your agency's pre-plans annually. And engage in joint drills and ICS training. For resources and planning tools, visit phmsa.gov, epa.gov/emergencies, or the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency website. Be informed. Be connected. Be ready.
Across Mississippi, a critical network runs quietly beneath our feet. Pipelines, some stretching for hundreds of miles, deliver fuels and materials essential to daily life: gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, propane, ethanol, and more. But when these systems fail, the consequences can be swift and severe. That's why first responders must be trained not just to react, but to understand how pipelines are built, how they're regulated, and how to work hand in hand with the operators responsible for them. This training will help you strengthen your pipeline awareness, understand Mississippi's laws and safety programs, recognize the clues of a pipeline emergency, and coordinate effectively with industry partners and regulatory agencies.
Mississippi is home to more than 22,000 miles of natural gas and hazardous liquid pipelines. These include transmission lines, carrying fuels across long distances from out-of-state production hubs, distribution lines, feeding gas directly into homes and businesses, gathering lines, collecting fuel from oil fields and gas wells, and refined product pipelines, delivering finished fuels to terminals and storage facilities throughout the state. Mississippi is also strategically located between major refining centers in Texas and Louisiana and distribution markets throughout the Southeast. Key pipeline corridors pass through Jackson, the state capital and energy logistics hub; Collins and Purvis, important terminals for refined fuels; Meridian, a regional node for interstate lines; Hattiesburg, Tupelo, Vicksburg, and the Gulfport area. Each with significant energy infrastructure, this network is critical to both the state economy and the national energy supply chain.
Pipelines are governed by a layered system of federal, state, and local regulation. At the federal level, several agencies play a key role. PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration under the U.S. Department of Transportation, oversees most safety requirements for pipeline operators. The Environmental Protection Agency responds to and manages environmental impacts of leaks and spills. OSHA enforces workplace safety. The key law is the Pipeline Safety Act, which mandates design, operation and maintenance standards, emergency response planning, inspection and enforcement authority, and public awareness and local responder coordination. The law is implemented through Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically Parts 190 through 199, which cover operator qualifications, leak detection, integrity management, and emergency procedures.
At the state level, Mississippi plays an active role. The Mississippi Public Service Commission is the primary state pipeline safety authority. Through its Pipeline Safety Division, the PSC enforces federal standards for intrastate pipelines, those that operate entirely within state lines. The PSC's responsibilities include conducting inspections of pipelines, valves, compressor stations, and control systems, investigating leaks and safety violations, reviewing operator records and emergency response procedures, and working with local fire departments to share pipeline data and response expectations. Meanwhile, the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency provides statewide coordination during pipeline emergencies. MEMA supports resource deployment, interagency communication, public alerts, and mutual aid across jurisdictions. MEMA also works with county-level local emergency planning committees to facilitate pre-incident planning, drills, and information sharing between pipeline companies and emergency responders.
pipeline safety is not just about laws. It's about the systems and partnerships that prevent incidents and prepare us when they happen. Every operator in Mississippi is required to implement a series of safety programs, including public awareness programs. Operators must provide emergency response information to fire departments, law enforcement, EMS agencies, public works, and local elected officials. This includes emergency contact numbers, product descriptions, pipeline maps or GIS data, leak recognition and response guidance, and training opportunities. Integrity management programs. Operators evaluate their pipelines for risk, especially in high-consequence areas, such as near schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods. They use internal inspection tools, known as smart pigs, to detect corrosion, cracking, or deformation before failure occurs. Control room management and leak detection. Operators monitor pipeline flow and pressure using SCADA systems. Real-time digital dashboards with alarm protocols and shut-off capabilities. If pressure drops or product flow is disrupted, the control room can shut down sections of pipe and dispatch crews to the location. Across Mississippi, a critical network runs quietly beneath our feet. Pipelines, some stretching for hundreds of miles, deliver fuels and materials essential to daily life: gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, propane, ethanol, and more. But when these systems fail, the consequences can be swift and severe. That's why first responders must be trained not just to react, but to understand how pipelines are built, how they're regulated, and how to work hand in hand with the operators responsible for them. This training will help you strengthen your pipeline awareness, understand Mississippi's laws and safety programs, recognize the clues of a pipeline emergency, and coordinate effectively with industry partners and regulatory agencies.
Mississippi is home to more than 22,000 miles of natural gas and hazardous liquid pipelines. These include transmission lines, carrying fuels across long distances from out-of-state production hubs, distribution lines, feeding gas directly into homes and businesses, gathering lines, collecting fuel from oil fields and gas wells, and refined product pipelines, delivering finished fuels to terminals and storage facilities throughout the state. Mississippi is also strategically located between major refining centers in Texas and Louisiana and distribution markets throughout the Southeast. Key pipeline corridors pass through Jackson, the state capital and energy logistics hub; Collins and Purvis, important terminals for refined fuels; Meridian, a regional node for interstate lines; Hattiesburg, Tupelo, Vicksburg, and the Gulfport area. Each with significant energy infrastructure, this network is critical to both the state economy and the national energy supply chain.
Pipelines are governed by a layered system of federal, state, and local regulation. At the federal level, several agencies play a key role. PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, under the U.S. Department of Transportation, oversees most safety requirements for pipeline operators. The Environmental Protection Agency responds to and manages environmental impacts of leaks and spills. OSHA enforces workplace safety. The key law is the Pipeline Safety Act, which mandates design, operation and maintenance standards, emergency response planning, inspection and enforcement authority, and public awareness and local responder coordination. The law is implemented through Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically Parts 190 through 199, which cover operator qualifications, leak detection, integrity management, and emergency procedures.
At the state level, Mississippi plays an active role. The Mississippi Public Service Commission is the primary state pipeline safety authority. Through its Pipeline Safety Division, the PSC enforces federal standards for intrastate pipelines, those that operate entirely within state lines. The PSC's responsibilities include conducting inspections of pipelines, valves, compressor stations, and control systems, investigating leaks and safety violations, reviewing operator records and emergency response procedures, and working with local fire departments to share pipeline data and response expectations. Meanwhile, the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency provides statewide coordination during pipeline emergencies. MEMA supports resource deployment, interagency communication, public alerts, and mutual aid across jurisdictions. MEMA also works with county-level local emergency planning committees to facilitate pre-incident planning, drills, and information sharing between pipeline companies and emergency responders.
Pipeline safety is not just about laws. It's about the systems and partnerships that prevent incidents and prepare us when they happen. Every operator in Mississippi is required to implement a series of safety programs, including public awareness programs. Operators must provide emergency response information to fire departments, law enforcement, EMS agencies, public works, and local elected officials. This includes emergency contact numbers, product descriptions, pipeline maps or GIS data, leak recognition and response guidance, and training opportunities. Integrity management programs. Operators evaluate their pipelines for risk, especially in high-consequence areas, such as near schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods. They use internal inspection tools, known as smart pigs, to detect corrosion, cracking, or deformation before failure occurs. Control room management and leak detection. Operators monitor pipeline flow and pressure using SCADA systems. Real-time digital dashboards with alarm protocols and shut-off capabilities. If pressure drops or product flow is disrupted, the control room can shut down sections of pipe and dispatch crews to the location. Mississippi is crisscrossed by pipelines that move refined petroleum products like gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, kerosene, and ethanol blends. These are different from crude oil pipelines or natural gas lines. Refined product pipelines operate under high pressure, move multiple fuels in sequence using a batching system, and serve regional distribution terminals, like those near Collins, Jackson, and Meridian. At these terminals, the products are offloaded into tanker trucks for local delivery. Incidents involving refined product pipelines can quickly become hazardous due to flashpoints. The fuels are highly flammable. Vapor hazards. Some products form explosive or toxic clouds. Water contamination. Many products float and spread on surface water. Runoff risks, especially in Mississippi's flat and flood-prone regions.
Mississippi first responders must stay alert for the clues of a liquid pipeline release. These can include strong fuel or chemical odors, dead or dying vegetation along a pipeline right-of-way, stains or sheens on soil or water, pools or sprays of product, vapor clouds or mist, unusual frost or condensation in warm conditions, and low roaring or hissing sounds. Remember, these signs may appear in remote farmland, roadside ditches, or even suburban neighborhoods. If you observe any of these indicators, approach with caution, stay uphill and upwind, shut down potential ignition sources, establish a safe perimeter and notify dispatch, use the pipeline marker to contact the operator directly, and initiate the incident command system.
During any confirmed or suspected incident, pipeline operators must be engaged immediately and fully. They are an integral part of unified command and should serve as technical specialists on your response team. Operators can identify the exact product involved, initiate remote shutoffs, share hazard and product control data, provide maps, valve locations, and flow direction, deploy spill response contractors and cleanup teams, and coordinate with the National Response Center, EPA, and PHMSA. In Mississippi, Many operators participate in annual training sessions and tabletop exercises with local fire departments, sheriff's offices, and emergency management agencies. Coordinate through your LEPC or county EMA office to build those relationships ahead of time. Mississippi is crisscrossed by pipelines that move refined petroleum products like gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, kerosene, and ethanol blends. These are different from crude oil pipelines or natural gas lines. Refined product pipelines operate under high pressure, move multiple fuels in sequence using a batching system, and serve regional distribution terminals, like those near Collins, Jackson, and Meridian. At these terminals, the products are offloaded into tanker trucks for local delivery. Incidents involving refined product pipelines can quickly become hazardous due to flashpoints. The fuels are highly flammable. Vapor hazards. Some products form explosive or toxic clouds. Water contamination. Many products float and spread on surface water. Runoff risks, especially in Mississippi's flat and flood-prone regions.
Mississippi first responders must stay alert for the clues of a liquid pipeline release. These can include strong fuel or chemical odors, dead or dying vegetation along a pipeline right-of-way, stains or sheens on soil or water, pools or sprays of product, vapor clouds or mist, unusual frost or condensation in warm conditions, and low roaring or hissing sounds. Remember, these signs may appear in remote farmland, roadside ditches, or even suburban neighborhoods. If you observe any of these indicators, approach with caution, stay uphill and upwind, shut down potential ignition sources, establish a safe perimeter and notify dispatch, use the pipeline marker to contact the operator directly, and initiate the incident command system.
During any confirmed or suspected incident, pipeline operators must be engaged immediately and fully. They are an integral part of unified command and should serve as technical specialists on your response team. Operators can identify the exact product involved, initiate remote shutoffs, share hazard and product control data, provide maps, valve locations, and flow direction, deploy spill response contractors and cleanup teams, and coordinate with the National Response Center, EPA, and PHMSA. In Mississippi, many operators participate in annual training sessions and tabletop exercises with local fire departments, sheriff's offices, and emergency management agencies. Coordinate through your LEPC or county EMA office to build those relationships ahead of time.
Oil powers our vehicles, heats our homes, and helps manufacture everything from plastics to medicine. But before it fuels our lives, it travels a long journey from deep underground to the gas pump and beyond. This is the life cycle of petroleum. Let's follow the process step by step.
The journey begins with exploration. Geologists and engineers use seismic data and geological surveys to locate underground formations where oil may be trapped, often miles beneath the Earth's surface. Once a site is confirmed, crews bring in drilling rigs to bore into the rock layers. A single vertical or horizontal well can reach thousands of feet underground. Steel casing and cement seal the well to prevent leaks and protect groundwater. When oil is reached, it flows to the surface under natural pressure, or is pumped up using artificial lift systems.
Once extracted, the raw material, called crude oil, is collected at the surface. From here, it enters the gathering system, a network of small pipelines and collection facilities that move the oil to central storage or processing sites. At this point, water, gas, and sediment are separated from the crude. Natural gas might be captured and sold, or flared off, if no infrastructure exists. The stabilized crude oil is now ready for the next phase, transportation.
To reach refineries, oil must be moved, often across long distances. There are four major modes of transportation. Pipelines, the safest and most common method for inland movement. Rail, used when pipelines aren't available or in remote areas. Marine vessels, such as barges and tankers for coastal or overseas routes. Tanker trucks, for smaller or local deliveries. In the United States, most crude oil flows through pipelines to refineries. In Mississippi, major pipeline systems connect the Gulf Coast with inland markets and distribution terminals. At the refinery, crude oil is transformed into usable products. This is done through distillation, a process that heats the oil to separate it by boiling point into components like gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, propane, asphalt, lubricants, and petrochemical feedstocks. Additional processes, like cracking and blending, modify the chemical structure of heavier hydrocarbons into lighter, more valuable products. Each barrel of crude can yield up to 42 gallons of finished products, depending on the crude type and refinery technology.
After refining, petroleum products are moved to distribution terminals. These sites are located near major highways, airports, or population centers. Products travel through product pipelines, barges, rail, or trucks to reach these terminals. At the terminal, fuels are stored in large tanks and carefully blended to meet seasonal or local requirements, such as winter-grade gasoline or biofuel mixes. Fuel trucks then load up at the rack and head out to gas stations, airports, bulk fuel depots, and industrial or commercial users.
On the 22nd of February, 2020, a quiet evening in rural Mississippi was shattered by a sudden emergency. Near the small town of Satarsha, a high-pressure pipeline carrying supercritical carbon dioxide ruptured, releasing a dense plume of CO2 and hydrogen sulfide into the air. What followed was a chaotic scene: vehicles stalling, people collapsing, and confusion spreading through the fog. This incident became one of the most significant CO2 pipeline failures in U.S. history, and it holds important lessons for first responders, pipeline operators, emergency planners, and every community near hazardous materials infrastructure.
What we went through is we had what you call a guillotine rupture of a 24-inch CO2 pipeline. The biggest problem we had in responding to this is when it occurred, we really had no idea what we were dealing with. It was a Saturday evening. I was returning home from a shopping trip with my wife and family. I just happened to have the radio on, and I hear a report of a green fog and a rotten egg smell in the Highway 3 area, which immediately I thought, well, this is unusual. You know, what have we got going on? Which was followed by some radio traffic of people who were having shortness of breath, and some even more traffic of people's vehicles who were stalling out. So I thought, what is going on? You know, what have we got in this area?
The pipeline involved was owned by Denbury Gulf Coast Pipelines, a subsidiary of Denbury Resources. It transported compressed carbon dioxide, used for enhanced oil recovery, from Jackson Dome, a naturally occurring CO2 reservoir in Mississippi, down toward oil fields in Louisiana. On that Saturday evening, a landslide triggered by heavy rainfall caused the 24-inch pipeline to shift and rupture. Over 31,000 barrels of compressed CO2 and trace amounts of hydrogen sulfide were released. Because CO2 is heavier than air, it sank into low-lying areas, including the village of Satarsha, about half a mile away. The gas plume displaced breathable air, creating a hazardous atmosphere within minutes.
So we started our response as you would any hazmat response that you didn't know what was going on. We're going to try to find where the hot area is, keep our people out until we can get them suited up right and get people in. As the call continued, we were, again, the first 20, 30, I think it was 40 minutes, our biggest problem was determining what the problem was. We had responders that, even though I told them to stage out, some of the deputies were going in ahead of time without, where they were faltering. I was a law enforcement officer myself, so I'm not going to strive on that. But we have this heroic thing inside us that we're invincible. So we had some guys going in, and eventually one of my responders, one of my fire chiefs who happened to work in the pipeline industry, figured out that it was not the chlorine gas, which we originally thought might have been. The only thing in that area was a water tank that had some chlorine gas. With the original call of the rotten egg smell and the green fog, that's what we had feared to start with. He had done a lot of pipeline and contract work for Denbury in the past, and he was able to contact them and ask them had they had a problem, in which time they told us that, yeah, at about 7:07 they'd had a drop of pressure, and that's when we were able to determine that the rupture was a CO2 pipeline.
At approximately 7 p.m., 911 calls began pouring in from residents reporting a strange fog, breathing difficulties, and stalled vehicles. Emergency medical services, fire departments, and law enforcement from surrounding counties responded immediately. Among the first on scene were Yazoo County deputies, paramedics, and local firefighters. Responders found multiple people unconscious or disoriented along Highway 433. At least 49 people required medical evaluation. Over 300 residents were evacuated from Satarsha and surrounding homes. The cloud caused engines and cars and even emergency vehicles to stall, complicating evacuation and rescue. Most responders had no advanced training on CO2 pipeline hazards, and no pre-existing emergency response plan was in place for a release of this kind.
They had a drop in pressure, and their standard operating procedure was, well, the first thing we're going to do is send an operator out to verify what has happened. In this case, the operator lived 40 minutes away or 45 minutes away in Gluckstadt. So we had no communication between them and ourselves 40 minutes into this incident until we contacted them. So that was the number one problem we had in this, and we noticed that standard operating procedure in the past, after we got together and did some drills and again started working together, that wasn't going to work anymore, that we needed to understand everybody's procedures and how the problems were in the situation we were in. Another situation we had is we were not prepared with 5 gas monitors. We had standard 4 gas monitors, but we didn't have anything to detect CO2, which if we'd have known that pipeline was in our area, we would have been better prepared and better able to respond.
Several key organizations were involved in the response and investigation. Yazoo County Emergency Management Agency coordinated local response. Denbury Resources remotely shut down the pipeline and dispatched technicians. Pafford EMS provided frontline medical care. The Mississippi Emergency Management Agency and U.S. Department of Transportation's PHMSA arrived in the days that followed. Local emergency planning committees provided logistical and planning support. The National Transportation Safety Board launched a formal investigation, but coordination challenges quickly became apparent. Denbury's control center was slow to communicate key information about the gas release. First responders lacked immediate access to pipeline maps, product identification, or atmospheric monitoring tools. No community notification system was triggered, and many residents were caught off guard.
So we didn't have any pipeline incident-specific training related to CO2 before this took place. Again, you're having responding vehicles who are trying to respond. Yeah. Are actually flogging down because an internal combustion engine can't operate without oxygen in the air. Right. And what does CO2 do? It displaces the oxygen from the air. So right. We're just trying to make sure that we can set a parameter and make sure that we can get people in and get people out that have to be removed from the scene. So we basically set up 4 checkpoints around the area. Satarsha, there's only 4 ways in. It's a very rural community. So we set up a checkpoint on 433. We set up a checkpoint on the north side of Highway 3, one on the south side of Highway 3. And in this particular case, we were not forced to set up a checkpoint on the other side of Satartia because in 2020, I don't know if you remember, we were going through the backwater flooding incident, so that side was cut off.
Carbon dioxide, though non-flammable and non-toxic in small amounts, becomes a silent killer in confined or concentrated environments. At high concentrations, it displaces oxygen, leading to asphyxiation. Victims can collapse without warning. Unlike natural gas, carbon dioxide has no odor, no flame, and no color. It's invisible. Heavier than air, it sinks into valleys and enclosed spaces, making low-lying areas like Satartia especially vulnerable. Adding to the danger, the CO2 released in this incident contained hydrogen sulfide, a toxic, corrosive gas that can cause eye irritation, respiratory distress, and even death at higher levels.
And again, we started going door to door to make sure we were getting people out. We were able to contact the National Weather Service when we did get the information from Denbury at the time of what product they had and how much they felt was released. The National Weather Service was able to quickly give us a plume cloud.
Okay.
I had called for some mutual aid from Warren County to bring in from the south side of the county because we knew we weren't going. The patients that we took to that side, we weren't going to be able to evacuate to the hospital in Yazoo City because of our hot zone. And they were able to bring a team down and some ambulances down so we could transport in either direction while we were moving the patients out. There were 43 civilians who were transported to the hospital to receive medical attention that night, and 2 first responders. You had people calling in saying, look, I don't know what's going on. My car has stopped. My friend is seizing, can't breathe, losing consciousness, and just terrible situations like that. They just couldn't breathe. They couldn't figure out what was going on. They had patients seizing again, just very short of breath.
Yeah, I think we a lot of times have a misconception because we think CO2, well, I was taught in school, we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out CO2, and the plants breathe in CO2 and they breathe out oxygen.
Well, and I've heard this over and over, and when we first went through this, when we were first, again, trying to bridge this gap, working with these companies, the biggest thing I heard from companies says CO2 is not dangerous. We use it in everyday products. And my response to them was, a pill is not dangerous either until you put it over somebody's face.
Right.
So when you have CO2 and oxygen, no, it's not as dangerous. But when the CO2 displaces all the oxygen, then you have a problem. We have to have both. You can't have one. We were on scene from 7 o'clock that night until 11 a.m. the next morning.
The next morning.
So,
and being February, I'm assuming kind of when you got there, it was already dark.
It was already dark.
And so the sun comes up the next morning, and what are we seeing?
Okay, so the next morning, well, even that particular night, so this product actually released from the 707 release point and was not shut off completely until about 11 p.m. that night.
Okay.
There was only 9 miles between the shutoff valve and where the actual rupture took. So it blew off for 4 to 4.5 hours from the actual blowout till it stopped. It looked like something off The Walking Dead. You walked into the town, there were abandoned vehicles everywhere where people had just left their vehicles. There was an eerie chemical smell. There was just a fog in the town. It was really strangely like something out of a zombie apocalypse, as I can pronounce that as I get on here. As the night flowed through, of course, we set up an evacuation shelter for the people that had evacuated. Fortunately, this happened at 7 p.m. on a Saturday night. There's only about 50 residents in the community of Satartia itself. That particular night, we evacuated over 200 people from the surrounding areas. In that particular evening, a lot of people may not have been home, so there weren't as many people home. They were out doing things. If this incident would have taken place at 2 or 3 in the morning, we surely would have had a problem because people would not have been awake when we sent out our alerts. They would not have been able to know what was going on, and it would have just been harder. It would have been a harder response. The next morning at 10 o'clock, we continued air monitoring until to a point, I think it was a little before 10, where the air monitors on scene said, okay, the air quality is now to a sense that we can bring people back into the community. And I said, well, let's hold on a second before we do. Let's start checking in the houses. And as they went into the homes were still at a point where we couldn't re-enter. So it took another hour and a half after you actually opened the homes up before we could let people respond to their homes.
The Satartia CO2 rupture revealed serious gaps in preparedness for both pipeline operators and emergency responders. Here are key lessons learned. First responder training is essential Responders must be trained to recognize and respond to non-traditional hazmat releases, especially those with no obvious visual or chemical cues. Public notification systems need improvement. Communities near hazardous pipelines should be enrolled in reverse 911, text alert systems, and other notification platforms. Operators must share critical information faster. Immediate access to pipeline maps, product data, and shutdown status is essential for an effective response. LEPCs need to include CO2 and emerging hazards in planning. Emergency plans must evolve to reflect new technologies, products, and infrastructure, including carbon capture and sequestration pipelines. Atmospheric monitoring equipment should be available locally. Responders need gas detectors that can sense CO2 and other inert gases, not just flammable vapors or oxygen levels. Federal standards for CO2 pipelines require review. The incident led PHMSA and the NTSB to recommend stronger regulations for siting, construction, and emergency planning for CO2 transport systems.
So during the response, there was multiple harrowing experiences, but as you build a relationship with people, you don't realize how it affects you for people that you know on a response like this. There was a particular deputy who I've worked with for 3 years, and at the time, he's now the chief of police in Yazoo City, but at the time he was the chief deputy for Yazoo County Sheriff's Department. And you'll find on these rural calls that a lot of times your very first responders to these incidents, with volunteer fire departments being the main departments in most of these areas, is going to be law enforcement, which is why it's crucial to get them involved in this training also. But Terry Gann was the first one on scene, and Terry, of course, was not equipped with any kind of SCBAs. He is a trained firefighter because he was a volunteer fireman himself, but he was not equipped in his patrol vehicle with this, which we've worked on changing that since this incident. So as Terry arrives on scene as a law enforcement officer, he sees there's people in trouble. He's wanting to get people out, and as I'm listening to him talk on the radio, his original traffic was very clear, and professional. As Terry goes in and brings people out, each time he goes in, he becomes more and more in a confused state. I can hear it on the radio. He starts becoming incoherent. I told him several times, I said, Terry, you need to get out. You need to get out. I need you out now. Don't respond anymore. And when he continued to go in that third time, as I'm listening to this, I was reminded of the training video, the Blue Canary video that we've all seen 1,000 times, where I think it was anhydrous ammonia video that we've all seen, where the deputy arrives on scene and responds up there, and we literally watch him die on that video.
In about 3 seconds.
In about 3 seconds, and hear his heart rate. You can actually hear it over it. And as I'm listening to Terry go in and out, and as he becomes more and more incoherent, I'm thinking, my friend's fixing to die right here. At that point, I had another responder who I knew I had SCBAs on. I said, look, go in and get him now. Pull him out and don't let him back in. And we were fortunately able to get him pulled out, at which time he had to receive medical attention and was transported to the hospital that particular night. So what that tells you is you can be a hero, but you can't be a hero if you can't help yourself. So although I think that Terry's actions were heroic, we had to spend another responder in that may could have helped somebody else to pull him out at that time. So let's learn a lesson from this.
The patients you had transported, what were some of the things the hospitals were seeing, some of their illnesses and all that developed?
Okay, again, let's go back to that. Of the 45 patients transported, when we first determined that we had CO2, the rotten egg smell that you were smelling was something called H2S. And had we all been properly, which when you hear H2S as a responder, you know that there's a problem of fatality. So we don't know the exact amount of H2S which is included into this product. And as we're letting the hospital know that we have patients with CO2 and possible H2S, the way that they responded to these patients is going to be different. They actually had a full decon set up for everybody that was responding to these calls. So these patients were being deconned before they were taken into the hospital, which we know now was unnecessary because it was the CO2 in the little amount. A little bit of pre-planning and pre-training would have avoided this for us. And originally the hospital were looking for, they didn't know what they were looking for. So again, it was just a lot of confusion as they're responding to this or to responding to how to treat the patients as they got there, which again, the communication ahead of time would have avoided this. But most of the patients were suffering from shortness of breath, asthmatic, couldn't breathe. The patients that Briggs and them pulled out that were almost to their death at that point had totally lost consciousness, had defecated on themselves, were completely out. And were just before death, their respirations were low. I think when Jerry and them got there, again, I think they were minutes before that we would have lost those 3 men that he pulled off of that particular car on the back road that we were able to locate again with the assistance of the plume cloud. We just happened to look back and see this road and say, look, nobody lives on this road, but let's send somebody down it just in case. Their car had shut down going on a back road when this took place. And again, we wouldn't have located them just looking at a map of the town. We had to look at the plume and go back and find all the roads in the surrounding areas. And we had numerous. There were older. This is a retirement type or a small community out there. There were several older patients that did have breathing conditions and all. And to be honest with you, in the long term, there's still some people out there that are complaining from effects of this particular incident. I had a lot of questions about why we weren't contacted. There was still an investigation going on with PHMSA while this was going on. So there was a lot of questions, but we started researching the product a lot more within ourselves and doing some internal training on how to respond to these incidents from what we had learned and just digging into the information. So we had very much started our internal communication. Denbury immediately had offered to do a mass alert system for us, which I don't think had set in when we had the second incident, but we were working along the lines of it and getting meters for it. So the communication had started. We were laying the groundwork in between there. Now, of course, since then it's been tremendous. And Exxon took over. We've had nothing but cooperation. But at that time, we were just starting to lay the groundwork in the training.
I got you. Okay, and so the second incident was when?
The second incident was in October of that same year.
Same year.
And it was not on a 24-inch line, and it was not a guillotine rupture. This was a valve that had froze. As they were trying to shut it, had froze open, and they were unable to close the valve. And the strange thing about it, and to tell you how these incidents can vary from incident to incident, this incident actually lasted, I think, 26 or 28 hours of it actually bleeding off, and there was much more product that was released in that incident than there was in the first over the period of time. But we actually only had to make one evacuation and had absolutely no injuries involved in this incident. Now, we had the highway shut down for that 26 hours of passing through, but more product, more product released, longer lasting incident, one evacuation, only the house that I believe I showed you where we were. It was directly across the road, and they weren't even home at the time, and absolutely no injuries. Well, the cause of this particular incident was a geographical hazard. Yazoo County, in the area where this was, there's a soil that we've always called Yazoo clay, and it shifts. It's very unstable. Again, this particular year was 2020. We had a lot of flooding, a lot of excessive rain, and over the previous years before that, where we had the backwater flooding, it was just a lot of rainfall in the area. And over time, the land where the pipeline was located had shifted, and it was continuing to shift. And the shift of it had forced a pressure on the pipeline, which caused it to rupture. I believe if you read the paperwork in their investigation, they find them on several cases of failure to monitor the ground movement properly. They find them on not making contact. I think the regulation is you have a certain amount of time to make contact with your agency once you know that you have a problem. And several other instances they had noted in there where they had not participated, that particular company, with our local responders and training and our LEPCs or any type. They had showed where we had numerous drills with other companies, and they'd been asked to participate several times and didn't. Just a lack of communication between the responders and the operator at that time.
And since then, obviously, this company, I don't want it to make it sound like we're necessarily bad-mouthing any company or anything like that, but they have since been kind of changed hands.
Yeah. So actually, Denbury, 2 years, year and a half, really started trying to make an effort to talk to us, and they were bought out by Exxon. And when Exxon bought it out, the actual president of ExxonMobil came in and sat down in Yazoo City and said, "Hey, tell me what happened. Tell me what we can do to make this better." And they have really listened to everything that I've said and made sure that changes have taken place. They have provided training for our first responders. I know that they've worked with y'all on developing this training around here. They have been nothing but a perfect partner. Everything they've said has come to fruition at this point. Okay, so since this incident took place, and we as good first responders know that when we have a problem, what we need to do is fix it so that our people, the people that we're going to protect, that this doesn't happen to them again, and that our first responders do. So I became, and I never was a big advocate or a believer that you could make a change before, but when I saw this problem, I said, look, this has got to be solved. And I didn't want to be one of these guys that's known as an anti-pipeline guy, because I'm not. I'm very much, I'm not anti-pipeline or pro-pipeline or anything. The biggest thing I am is pro-public safety. And I saw a large gap between pipeline operators and first responders. If you'll look back through history, and I think even they'll tell you, and I know they will as I've discussed it before, the mindset of an operator was, hey, the less that we put out, the better, and if something happens, we'll fix it. Well, we have found that that's just not going to work anymore. So I've been all over the country. I've been in several states where CO2 pipelines are coming in and testified on behalf of the people who had questions and for the first responders that are there. I've been to D.C. several times. I've actually met with several senators where we're working on legislation to require these operators to not just do the minimum, but to go a little bit above and beyond. You can do the minimum all day long, but those that go above and beyond are the ones that are going to make sure that we bridge this gap. Let's go into these small rural communities. They need to meet with our responders and determine their capabilities. And when we find that we have a gap in capabilities, if they've got a product running through our community and is making money off it, they need to help us bridge this gap. If they can't do it directly, find us ways to get it. Let's find our operators and see who has been trained and who have not been trained. And those that hadn't, let's provide them with a way to train.
Today, the Satarsha incident serves as a wake-up call. As carbon capture and storage grows across the U.S., including right here in Mississippi, more communities will find themselves living near high-pressure CO2 pipelines. Preparedness is not optional. It requires training, coordination, and clear lines of communication between first responders, pipeline operators, local emergency planners, state and federal agencies, and the public.
What would you tell somebody that, say they're sitting here and they're thinking, well, I probably don't have CO2, in my response area. I doubt I do. They may not know, but what would you tell them as far as being aware of what's there?
Okay, so I can't put the total blame on our operators ourselves. And I tell this story all the time. I say I didn't know that we had a CO2 pipeline running through our area, and I truly didn't. But I did know that we had oil fields in our area, and I did know that they use CO2 to enhance the oil recovery. So in my mind, maybe I should have been checking into it. So we as first responders or emergency responders, especially in a position like mine as emergency management director, have our duty to go out and determine, what we have in our area, to question, hey, where does this come from? To meet with these people, just to learn. So as they have a responsibility to tell us, we have a responsibility to go out and find out what products and what dangers we have in our community and make sure that our people are prepared to respond to these incident-specific situations.
And that's one thing on the fire service side. We were very big as far as pre-plans and building walkthroughs that we would do. And then a lot of departments during COVID, when restrictions had come into place, stopped doing those walkthroughs. But you're still driving around, and these markers are everywhere. They're everywhere. There's the right-of-ways. There's fencing around different pump stations and things like that have who to call and things like that. So really kind of just incorporating that into your pre-plans. What have, from industry side, now that you've gotten a big look at the what's coming up as far as the industry side of things, and what would you, if you could forecast CO2 in Mississippi, what does that look like in the years to come?
Well, of course, the CO2 industry right now, I think there's 5,000 total miles in the country. And everybody's like, oh, it's very safe because, there's only been one incident we've got in all these years. But we're projecting that this is going to grow tenfold as years go by, and I feel like it's going to with the way things are going. So if the industry grows tenfold, if you go from 5,000 miles of pipeline to 50,000, what do you think the chances of an incident occurring are? So we've got to continue to educate not just our responders, but to make sure our public is educated. I tell this story all the time too. In our school system, we educate people on how to respond to incidents all the time. You don't live near the ocean, but you know what to do in a tsunami, right?
Right.
So why are we not incorporating these industrial type accidents into our educational system, into our church system, into our community meetings? Why would we not prepare people basically what to do in case there's a CO2 incident? That incident wouldn't have been that we had before. Had everybody been prepared and had an idea of what to do in that situation, you would have had much less of a cluster than you do trying to teach them on the fly. So we need to incorporate basic responses, not just to our responders, but to our communities themselves.
Right, and a lot of it is not even specific to the substance being released, because evacuating is evacuating.
Evacuating is shelter in place. And that's another thing. Everybody wants to say, well, let's just shelter in place in these incidents. How many people really know what shelter in place means?
Exactly.
I mean, shelter in place, is that just stay in your house, or is that shut off your air vents? We need to educate our people on what the basic rules of evacuation and basically rules of shelter in place are, and make sure they understand how to do it. I've constantly preached around the country as I talk to operators as engagement with the responders to make sure that they have the right equipment and the right training and the ability to get it. But again, I can't strive enough that we as responders, not just in my position as the Director of Emergency Management, but these small fire departments need to engage with the pipeline operators. You'll find that you're going to have somebody within your community that's going to be a part of these organizations. Let's go out and meet them. Let's invite them to our departments. Let's make them feel like they're part of us and part of our community. They're going to be much more apt to be open with us and communicate and help us train if we will engage and bring them into the community.
I think of when I was a volunteer firefighter and the meetings we would have, and I can think about us sitting around the table for a meeting, a training, and thinking, I'm thinking of faces and people's names right now, and I bet when I asked if I got to 4 people, somebody is going to know somebody that works on
Absolutely.
pipeline.
Yeah, or not just a pipeline. And again, this is pipeline specific, but any industry that you have within your community. We have multiple different types of industry within our community, and a lot of times you're going to find that they engage themselves in it. We have a large chemical plant in our county, which over time is going to wind up meeting up with the CO2 industry as this goes further. So you've got people that are within your department that are going to know somebody that is in just about every industry within there. So we truly don't have a reason not to know the things or to be involved or to get them. It's just make sure we engage with these people and bring them into our departments.
And doesn't your county now use an alert system that you've implemented?
Okay, so the county for the public?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have a mass alert system, which is, again, the operator actually pays for us to renew every year, to where we can notify citizens on any evacuation situations. We use it for weather, we use it for evacuation, for pipeline, for traffic, for road closures, and we've really promoted it amongst the citizens to make sure they're all signed in. We use it for our first responders for direct messaging. So the mass alert system has been proved to be very, very effective for our community. And we also have 5 gas monitors within our department so that we're able to respond to these particular situations.
Outstanding.
The Satarsha event was avoidable, and it was survivable. By studying its failures, we can protect future lives. One pipeline, one small town, dozens affected. The Satarsha CO2 release taught us just how fast a routine evening can turn into a hazardous materials emergency. The question is, will we be ready next time?
Pipelines are the veins of our modern economy. Across the United States, including over 41,000 miles right here in Mississippi, pipelines quietly transport the fuels, gases, and chemicals that power homes, businesses, and transportation systems. From crude oil to natural gas, refined fuels to carbon dioxide, pipeline infrastructure is critical to how energy moves in America. But how are pipelines built? What goes into designing, constructing, and maintaining this vast underground network? Let's take a closer look at how pipeline infrastructure is planned, constructed, and operated, and why it matters to communities, first responders, and public safety.
Pipeline infrastructure is made up of three core components. Transmission pipelines are large diameter lines that move products long distances, often between states or regions. Distribution pipelines are smaller lines that deliver gas or product to homes, businesses, and local end users. Gathering pipelines collect crude oil or gas from production sites and transport it to processing facilities. These pipelines may carry different products, including crude oil, refined fuels like gasoline or diesel, natural gas, carbon dioxide, anhydrous ammonia, and various petrochemicals. Mississippi, with its proximity to the Gulf of America and major refining hubs, plays a key role in both transmitting and storing energy products across the Southeast.
Before any pipeline is built, months, sometimes years, of planning, surveying, and permitting are required. Pipeline operators work with engineers, surveyors, geologists, and environmental experts to select a safe and efficient route. Key considerations include land ownership and right-of-way negotiations, environmental impacts on wetlands, rivers, wildlife, and historical sites, proximity to homes, schools, and public buildings, and access for construction and emergency response. In Mississippi, companies must follow both federal regulations under PHMSA and state-level environmental and utility oversight. Agencies like the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality may be involved in waterway crossings and site evaluations.
Once the route is approved and rights of way are secured, construction begins. The process typically follows these phases: clearing and grading. Vegetation and trees are cleared, and a working area is graded to prepare the construction corridor. Trenching. A trench is excavated, usually 4 to 10 feet deep, depending on pipe size, location, and product type. Mississippi's diverse terrain, from delta lowlands to pine forests, means trenching crews must adjust for soil stability, water table, and slope erosion. Stringing and bending. Sections of steel pipe, often 40 to 80 feet long, are delivered to the site, lined up, and bent to follow terrain contours. Welding and inspection. Pipes are welded together in sequence. Each weld is visually inspected and X-rayed to ensure quality. Non-destructive testing is a critical safety step. Coating and wrapping. To prevent corrosion, the weld joints are coated with epoxy or protective wraps. The entire pipeline is tested for leaks before burial. Lowering in and backfilling. Once welded and coated, the pipeline is carefully lowered into the trench using side booms or cranes, then backfilled with soil. Testing and commissioning. The line is pressure tested, usually with water, in a process called hydrostatic testing. This verifies integrity before being placed into service.
In addition to underground pipe, several above-ground features are essential to pipeline operation. Pump stations move liquids through the pipeline by maintaining pressure. Compressor stations do the same for natural gas. Block valves can isolate sections of pipeline in case of emergency. Pigging stations allow operators to clean and inspect the inside of the pipe. Many of these are operated remotely through supervisory control and data acquisition systems, or SCADA, with real-time monitoring from centralized control centers. In Mississippi, the strategic placement of pump and compressor stations ensures that product can move efficiently across long rural stretches, often with minimal above-ground visibility.
Pipeline construction and operation are governed by strict federal and state safety standards, including PHMSA regulations under the U.S. Department of Transportation, standards from the American Petroleum Institute, environmental rules enforced by the EPA and state agencies like MDEQ, and OSHA workplace safety requirements for construction crews. During construction, companies must control erosion and sediment runoff, monitor wildlife habitats and wetland buffers, and use horizontal directional drilling to avoid disturbing rivers, highways, or sensitive areas. After installation, pipelines are patrolled by air, monitored by sensors, and subject to integrity management programs that include regular inspections, leak detection, and emergency response coordination.
Understanding how pipelines are constructed helps first responders prepare for the unexpected. Each pipeline has different pressure levels, product characteristics, and access points. Construction documents and as-built plans should be shared with local emergency management, LEPCs, and fire departments. This helps responders identify block valve locations, understand pipeline depth and access challenges, know the type of product and its hazards, whether flammable, toxic, or asphyxiating, and plan for incident command and staging areas. The more responders know about the infrastructure running beneath their feet, the better they can protect their communities. From the forested hills of northern Mississippi to the riverbanks of the Delta, pipeline infrastructure delivers the energy that keeps our region running. But building a pipeline is never simple. It takes careful route selection, community coordination, skilled construction and inspection, strict environmental compliance, and a commitment to long-term safety. By understanding how pipelines are built and how they operate, first responders and local officials can be better partners in safety, preparedness, and rapid response. Because when it comes to pipeline emergencies, knowledge saves time, and time saves lives.
Pipelines quietly crisscross the country, under roads, farmland, neighborhoods, and industrial corridors. In Mississippi alone, more than 41,000 miles of pipeline move natural gas, petroleum products, and carbon dioxide through our communities. You may not see the pipe, but you'll often see the marker. Understanding pipeline identification markers is essential for first responders, emergency planners, public works, and even the general public. These signs don't just show where pipelines are buried, they tell you what's in the line, who operates it, and who to call in an emergency. Let's take a closer look.
Pipeline markers are required by federal law to identify the presence of buried pipelines. These signs are placed where pipelines cross roads, highways, railroads, or waterways, along pipeline right-of-way at regular intervals, and near public areas or sensitive zones. Markers come in different shapes and sizes, but all include 4 key pieces of information: the word warning or caution, usually in bold print, the type of product in the pipeline, such as natural gas, petroleum, or CO2, the name of the operator, the company that owns and controls the pipeline, an emergency contact number, a 24/7 hotline to reach the operator.
While markers are important, it's just as important to know what they don't tell you. Pipeline markers do not show the exact location or depth of the pipeline, how many pipelines are in the same corridor, the direction the product is flowing, whether it's high pressure or low pressure, or when maintenance or testing is taking place. That's why it's critical not to rely on a single marker for decisions involving excavation, planning, or emergency operations, and to never operate any pipeline valves. Always call 811 before digging, and always contact the pipeline operator directly during an emergency.
Let's walk through a typical pipeline marker. At the top, you'll usually see warning, natural gas pipeline, or caution, petroleum pipeline. This tells you the product type, which determines your hazard classification. Natural gas is flammable, explosive, and has a vapor cloud risk. Petroleum products are flammable, toxic, and have pooling hazards. Anhydrous ammonia is corrosive with a toxic inhalation hazard, and CO2 has asphyxiation risk, especially in low-lying areas. Below that, you'll find the company name, for example, Kinder Morgan, Exxon, Boardwalk, or Colonial, and a 24-hour emergency phone number. If you're in Mississippi and you see a Denbury or Exxon marker near Yazoo County, you're likely near a CO2 transmission line, part of the same network involved in the 2020 Satartia incident. Always take the time to read the product type and emergency number. Take a picture if needed. These are the first details dispatch will need in an incident.
In the event of a suspected pipeline release, follow these steps. Secure the scene, keep people upwind and away from the suspected release, read the nearest marker, get the product type and operator name, call the number on the marker, and do not operate any pipeline valves or controls. Relay detailed information, include symptoms, visible vapor, product odor, or ground vibration. Wait for pipeline operator personnel. They will shut valves, isolate the product, and provide product-specific safety guidance. In Mississippi, most pipeline operators participate in the Mississippi 811 and Pipeline Association for Public Awareness Safety programs. That means their emergency contacts are tested and active year-round.
First responders and planners can access additional resources to supplement field markers. National Pipeline Mapping System found at npms.gov, a searchable database of pipeline operator locations. Mississippi 811 training, available to responders and public officials. Pipeline Emergency Response Guidelines, a quick reference tool on product types and control zones. Local emergency planning committees often keep contact sheets and pipeline maps for your jurisdiction. Operator-hosted training and mock drills. Ask your local operator when the next event is scheduled. Many Mississippi emergency managers already have relationships with key pipeline companies in their region. If you don't, now is the time to build one.
Pipeline markers may seem simple, but they can save lives. They are your first clue about what's underground, and your fastest link to the experts who can shut down the hazard. To recap, markers tell you the product, operator, and emergency number. They don't tell you depth, exact location, or flow direction. Always call the operator during a suspected emergency. Use NPMS 811 and LEPC contacts for deeper planning. Work with pipeline operators before an incident, not just during one. Because when seconds matter, knowing what's in the pipe and who to call makes all the difference.
From the Delta to the Pine Belt, and from Gulfport to Yazoo County, pipelines in Mississippi carry more than just oil and gas. They also transport liquefied gases, invisible hazards that can behave unpredictably during a release. These products move under pressure, often far from their natural state. When released, they can expand rapidly, displace oxygen, cause cryogenic injuries, or form explosive vapor clouds. In this video, we'll explore which liquefied gases are piped through Mississippi, how these substances behave under pressure, what first responders need to look for in a release, and the critical safety actions that could save lives.
Across Mississippi, common liquefied gases transported by pipeline include carbon dioxide, most notably used in enhanced oil recovery and transported in supercritical form, anhydrous ammonia, used in fertilizer production, agriculture, and industry. Liquefied petroleum gases, such as propane and butane, typically refined product from coastal terminals. Ethylene and propylene, moved in smaller volumes, often near chemical facilities or ports. These are not gases at normal temperature and pressure. They're liquids, or even dense fluids, maintained under pressure and often below their boiling point.
To understand the risk, responders must understand the science. Let's break down the key physical and chemical properties of these products. First, vapor pressure tells us how readily a substance vaporizes. Higher vapor pressure means more likely to become gas. Here are the vapor pressures at 70 Fahrenheit for key products. Next, we look at specific gravity. Less than 1 floats, Greater than 1 sinks. Here are the specific gravities for these products. Now, let's discuss vapor density. Greater than 1 will settle in low areas. Here's a look at vapor densities for these substances. Implication: NH3 rises, CO2, propane, and butane settle low. Finally, the expansion ratio indicates how much volume of liquid becomes as gas. These are the expansion ratios for key products. A small release of liquid can produce thousands of cubic feet of gas. Now that we know what these products are, what will you see, hear, or smell during a release? Carbon dioxide, CO2, odorless, colorless in gas form. Appears as a white, ground-hugging fog if rapidly released. May cause vegetation to wither in seconds. Asphyxiant, displaces oxygen. Early symptoms include dizziness and confusion.
Anhydrous ammonia, NH3, has a sharp, pungent odor. It causes severe irritation to eyes, lungs, and skin. The gas rises and spreads with the wind. A white vapor cloud is visible, especially in humid conditions. Anhydrous ammonia is corrosive and toxic in confined spaces. It is commonly used near Mississippi agricultural hubs.
Propane and butane pose serious risks. Be aware of faint hydrocarbon odor. Invisible vapor clouds can form. Vapor clouds can ignite, causing fire or explosion. Beware of BLEVE risks in case of fire, commonly found near refineries and farms. Stay safe and vigilant around LPG. Key visual cues to watch for are crucial. First, dense fog or mist near the ground. Look for frosting on valves, pipes, or grass. Watch for dead vegetation or rapid discoloration. Listen for hissing, jetting, or rumbling sounds. Take note of panic or collapse of animals or people. Stay vigilant in recognizing these signs for safety.
If you suspect a liquefied gas release, stop and assess from a distance. Consider approaching from upwind and uphill. Establish control zones early. A minimum 330 feet for initial isolation and adjust as needed. Evacuate low-lying areas, especially for CO2 or LPG. Use SCBA and full protective gear. Many gases are invisible and asphyxiating. Notify pipeline operator using marker info. Request regional hazmat or FEMSA assistance if the product is unknown or uncontrolled. Never assume vapor clouds are non-flammable or non-toxic. Additionally, first responders should never operate any pipeline valves. The shutdown process for a pipeline can be specific to the company that owns the line and the product involved. If a first responder closes a valve, this can cause additional problems down the line, can actually make the incident larger, or delay the restoration of the pipeline.
Natural gas powers homes, heats schools, and fuels industries across Mississippi. It's invisible, efficient, and potentially deadly when released uncontrolled. When a natural gas pipeline is damaged or leaking, first responders are among the first on scene. Your actions in those first minutes can save lives or escalate danger. This training will walk you through what natural gas is and how it behaves, what to do and what not to do at the scene, how to coordinate with pipeline operators, and key safety precautions every responder should follow.
Natural gas is primarily methane, a colorless, odorless, and flammable gas. It's lighter than air, meaning it tends to rise and dissipate. But it can accumulate if trapped in a structure or low ventilation area. Pipeline operators add a sulfur-based odorant called mercaptan giving natural gas that familiar rotten egg smell. But don't rely solely on your nose. Mercaptan can fade and wind can carry it away. Use gas monitors whenever possible to ensure safety.
If you're dispatched to a suspected gas leak or pipeline rupture, follow these essential steps. Approach with caution. Approach upwind and uphill if possible. Stage at least 330 feet away for a small leak, half a mile or more for a major rupture or fire. Park emergency vehicles outside the hot zone to avoid ignition sources. Secure the scene. Isolate the area, establish an incident command structure early and begin evacuations in the downwind and vulnerable areas. Eliminate ignition sources. Prohibit smoking, flares, or use of cell phones near the scene. Shut off vehicle engines inside the hazard perimeter and control radios and flashlights. Only use intrinsically safe equipment. Contact the pipeline operator immediately. Use the information on the nearest pipeline marker. Company name, emergency phone number, and pipeline product. Provide location by GPS or street. Conditions observed, such as odor, noise, vapor, or fire. Structures or people in danger. Operators are the only ones who can shut off flow remotely. Your job is containment and protection, not control of the product. Evacuate homes and buildings nearby, especially those downwind or downhill. Use gas meters to check for accumulation in structures. Protect critical infrastructure and keep roads clear for utility access.
In a natural gas emergency, some actions can make things much worse. Here's what not to do. Do not attempt to stop the leak yourself by plugging or clamping the pipe. Do not operate pipeline valves. This can increase pressure elsewhere or cause more damage. Do not assume it's safe just because you don't see flames. Do not allow public access or media near the site without authorization. Do not enter confined spaces to check for gas without proper monitoring and SCBA. Remember, a gas leak is not just a hazmat scene. It's a potential explosion site.
If a natural gas pipeline ignites, do not try to extinguish the fire unless life is at risk. Instead, let it burn in a controlled way while isolating the area. Prevent flames spread to structures, vegetation, or tanks. Wait for the pipeline operator to stop flow before extinguishment. Fires fed by pipeline pressure can reignite explosively if gas is left unburned.
Natural gas incidents require team coordination. Key partners include pipeline operators to shut off flow and advise on pipeline specifics. Local Emergency Planning Committee for pre-plans, maps, and response protocols. State Fire Marshal or EMA for escalation and resources. FEMSA and National Response Center for federal pipeline oversight and reporting. Utility companies to coordinate electricity or water shutoffs. Law enforcement for traffic and crowd control. Media liaisons to communicate clear public instructions.
Let's recap. What you do: approach safely and secure the scene, eliminate ignition sources, evacuate as needed, notify the pipeline operator, and establish unified command. What you don't do: operate valves, enter without detection equipment, or try to extinguish gas-fed fires prematurely. Every natural gas emergency is different. But one thing remains the same. Your role is to protect life and stabilize the scene, while the pipeline experts handle the product. Stay calm, stay informed, and always work together.
Pipeline emergencies can happen anywhere, crossing highways, under neighborhoods, through industrial zones, and across farmland. In Mississippi alone, thousands of miles of pipeline carry hazardous products every day: natural gas, crude oil, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and other highly pressurized or flammable substances. When a release or rupture occurs, The initial responders set the tone for the entire incident. That's why it's critical to understand how to establish command, develop an action plan, and apply effective strategies and tactics. Whether you're the first arriving engine, sheriff's deputy, or EMS unit, the first 5 minutes count. Start with a rapid scene size up. What's the location? Is it near homes, highways, schools? What are the products involved? Check pipeline markers. Are there signs of release such as a vapor cloud, noise, odor, hissing, bubbling, flames? Immediately establish the incident command system, even if it's just one unit on scene. Call it over the radio.
Engine 3, establishing incident command at suspected gas release near Highway 11 and Bus Barn Road.
This allows for an organized response from the start. Use unified command if multiple agencies or jurisdictions are involved, including local fire and EMS, law enforcement, county emergency management, pipeline operator, and state or federal officials.
Your next priority is to develop a basic incident action plan, a framework for the response. Even in fast-moving scenes, this plan gives structure. A pipeline IEP typically includes incident objectives, life safety, site security, environmental protection, coordination with operator, the operational period, the expected duration of this phase of response, initial ops containment and recovery, the safety plan, identify hazards such as product characteristics and ignition sources, set PPE and monitoring zones, make tactical assignments, assign key roles for staging, evacuation, hazmat group, liaison officer, and public info officer. Key tip: let the pipeline operator advise you on product behavior, pressure, and shut-off procedures. They are the experts on what's underground.
With strategies set, you now shift to tactical operations, the hands-on work. Common pipeline emergency tactics include air monitoring and gas detection, use multi-gas meters and verify LEL levels, controlling ignition sources, shut off vehicles, reroute traffic, ban use of flares or radios in the hot zone. Evacuation implementation, door-to-door, PA systems, or coordinated public alerting via the LEPC. Fire suppression standby. Stage lines and foam supplies, but don't extinguish a pipeline-fed flame unless flow is shut off. Hazmat identification. Use ERG, SDS sheets, and pipeline markings to guide response levels. Establishing a joint information center. Control public messaging with PIOs from fire, law enforcement, and the pipeline company.
Mississippi pipelines transport a range of hazardous products. Each requires different tactics. Natural gas, lighter than air, explosive at 5 to 15% in air. Use evacuation and ventilation. Propane and butane, heavier than air, pools in low areas, may travel and ignite at a distance. Ammonia, toxic, corrosive, heavier than air. Use SCBA, isolate and evacuate downwind. Carbon dioxide, colorless, odorless, asphyxiant, stays low to the ground. Ventilate and monitor oxygen levels. Always use product-specific tactics and consult the operator or Chemtrek for technical support.
Let's review. Establish incident command early. Don't wait. Develop a working incident action plan, even a simple one. Base your strategies on life safety and product hazards. Choose tactics carefully. Monitor, evacuate, and coordinate. Involve the pipeline operator. They are essential to safe resolution. And above all, protect responders by maintaining discipline, distance, and communication. Pipeline emergencies aren't routine, but your preparation can be. Respond smart, stay safe, and always lead with command.
When a pipeline carrying hazardous materials ruptures or leaks, the invisible dangers can be the most deadly. Toxic gases. explosive vapors, and asphyxiants. That's why every first responder operating at a pipeline incident must understand how to perform basic air monitoring. Your meter might be the first, and only, line of defense between your crew and an unseen threat.
You can't manage what you can't measure. Without air monitoring, first responders could walk straight into a flammable atmosphere that could ignite with a spark, a toxic vapor cloud that causes immediate health effects, or an oxygen-deficient zone where asphyxiation is a real risk. Most hazardous materials transported in Mississippi pipelines, like natural gas, propane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, pose one or more of these invisible threats.
At a minimum, your department should carry a multi-gas detector capable of measuring LEL, the lower explosive limit of combustible gases, O2, the oxygen level in the air, CO, carbon monoxide, H2S, hydrogen sulfide. Some may also detect VOCs or specific toxic gases, like ammonia. Always bump test your meter at the start of your shift. Make sure the sensors are reading correctly. Remember, a dead meter is worse than no meter. It gives false confidence.
Monitoring is not just about turning on the meter and walking around. You need a plan. Here's a basic monitoring strategy. Start upwind and approach from the side of the plume, never head on. Scan in layers, high and low. Some gases are lighter than air, others hug the ground. Mark off the hot zone, warm zone, and cold zone based on readings. Keep monitoring. Conditions change with time, weather, and product flow. Use your air readings to guide tactics, evacuation decisions, PPE levels, ignition control, and resource staging.
A 6-inch pipeline carrying propane develops a pinhole leak near a residential neighborhood outside Starkville. Residents call 911, reporting a strong gas smell. The first engine company arrives and sets up a staging area upwind. A firefighter in full PPE and SCBA uses a 4-gas meter to begin air monitoring. They detect the LEL is 18% at ground level in a nearby drainage ditch. Oxygen is 20.9%. No CO or H2S detected. Because propane is heavier than air, it's pooling in low areas. Command immediately expands the hot zone and calls for evacuations of nearby homes, especially downhill or near culverts. A perimeter is set, ignition sources are controlled, and air monitoring continues until the leak is isolated and vapors dissipate. Each pipeline product behaves differently. Natural gas is flammable, lighter than air and rises. Monitor high. Propane is flammable, heavier than air and pools low. Monitor ditches, culverts, and low areas. CO2 is heavier than air and is an asphyxiant. Monitor oxygen levels. Ammonia is lighter than air and toxic. Monitor for H2S or dedicated NH3 sensors. Know the vapor density, toxicity, and explosive range of the product before entering a hot zone.